I'm late. I'm very, very late, but I'm here. We're going to design and make a class today. And I kind of figured that a lot of people would be very confused if I included the words Mortal Kombat and Shadowdark. So if people kind of freak out a little bit or just don't get it at all, I totally understand. Let's just give it a try. You never know. It might work. It might not. I think it can work. And I'm going to give it a go, which means I probably have already done some homework. Okay, I'm going to put up a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll if you want to. I suggest grabbing some food, some drink, making sure you are comfortable, and we'll get into this very quickly. We have limited time. It's going to take a little while for us to make this, and I want to try to get as much of it done in the time frame we have as possible. So, with that being said, let's smash on in, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, but specifically Shadowdark, a version of Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to make a class, and we're going to make a class not so much for Mortal Kombat, but certainly based off the concepts of Mortal Kombat. We're going to make an elemental warrior. I'm thinking martial artist, monk, or warrior monk. I'm thinking elemental energy. I'm thinking all those things that make up really Mortal Kombat in many respects. I'm not going to take everything over from Mortal Kombat into Shadowdark, because Shadowdark is its own game. It's got its own thing. It still needs to be lethal, so I don't want to make a class that's not going to make the game lethal. I want the game to still feel lethal. That's an aspect of it, so I get it. I don't want to undermine its core aspects. So usually what I do with these, it takes me just under 2 hours to do this. I'm going to ask you a question, how you would go about making an elemental warrior or monk, I guess. And then I'm going to show you what I've come up with, and I'm going to build it, and we're going to reiterate on it until we get it there. Okay, so how would you build a elemental warrior class for Shadowdark RPG? Okay, all right, so how would you build an elemental warrior class for Shadowdark RPG? That is my question to you. I'll make it clear now, like, this sort of thing has just happened before. Like, this has happened. People have tried to make something like this in the past. It's not a new concept at all. Okay, so we're going to try to take what other people have done, see if we can do a better job. That's the whole point. That's where I'm at. Okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to decide on what are our inspirations for this class. So there are 3 areas that I think that we need to look at in terms of inspiration for making an elemental-based warrior who's more of sort of using their fists and their feet and probably using weapons a lot less. We need to figure out how to make that work. So we are obviously starting with the core rules for Shadowdark. So it needs to fit within the structure that we get for Shadowdark in terms of how you would design a class. Okay, so I'm going to show you all of that fairly quickly in a second. I've got a Google Doc that I've started. I always do some homework. So we're doing that. Then we need to look at when has it been done before. And I went looking at Tasha's and Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and these don't help me in the slightest, so that's no good to me. I had to go back to the player's handbook for 5e, and that is a very unsatisfying depiction of what we're trying to do. In fact, in many respects, it is so underwhelming and so weird because it is connected to chi or key points, and now they're called focus points, that I think it kind of loses its impact completely. Like, it just winds up being a monk, which is kind of what we're doing, but that's not exactly right. So I thought, okay, well, let's go back and have a look at AD&D. There's nothing there. So we're sorry, but we're on our own. today is one of those days where we simply have to figure it out as we go. And that is what I've discovered when I was starting to look at this. When I was trying to make a decision about what class we'd try to make for Shadowdark so that I could show you. So this is my document, and we'll be jumping back and forth. I want to go through what I've done so far so you can see. This is DriveThru because, believe it or not, we've already made 2 classes, the Samurai and the Arcane Archer, which I've put up onto Patreon in the free tier, not the paid tier, not the free tier. 31, it's the 31st here in July, 31st. Okay, cool. We are dealing with the Elemental Warrior. I'm going to highlight it now because I feel confident enough that I can get most of it done. Okay. Okay, so I haven't written up a specific sort of description of our Elemental Warrior because I didn't want to focus on that just yet. And then when it comes to weapons, I was almost tempted to give them no weapons, like they just wouldn't use weapons. So that's some feedback and some question I have for you. When it comes to an Elemental Warrior who uses things like fire and ice, electricity, things like that, do you think they need to have weapons, or should we just leave weapons completely out of it? Are they always just going to be smashing stuff with their fist? That's a question. So, yeah, we'll leave that there. I certainly don't want to give them all weapons. I don't know that I don't want to make them better than the fighter, and suddenly being able to change the kind of damage you can do from normal damage to fire essentially makes it magical in many sense. Essentially, you are punching with magical force, which is like a spellcaster in many respects. The only difference is, as we go through this, it's going to be really obvious that spellcasters can stop having spells, and the Elemental Warrior may well not stop having the ability to do this. So that's a very different thing. Okay, so this is an area that we'll work on and decide what to do. One of the things I don't think is going to be something I'm going to change, and that is I'm not giving them armor. I made a monk class. You'll find down in the description the player's expansion for Shadowdark RPG, created by myself, AJ Pickett, Mitchell Reed, Ollie DM, and David Bailey. That document has a monk in it, and I made a monk lead designer. We got that done, and I decided no armor, and I think I stick with that. How they deal with armor class is completely different. All right, since Shadowdark is just another form of D&D, we needed to look at that sort of thing, so I didn't think that armor was a factor, so we're going to leave that out. What I also did with that monk is because they were not wearing armor, and since you cannot wear armor as a monk, and I don't want it to have the ability to wear armor, the Elemental Warrior, either, they have to have more hit points. You need to be able to soak up more damage. Otherwise, you're squishy, and you're at front line. And although you do have no opportunity attacks or attacks of opportunity in Shadowdark, so you could move in and out of combat if you're doing melee attacks, the reality is you're still going to get hit quite a bit. The more likely you're going to be hit a lot. So there has to be a bigger number for that, because you don't get armor at all. So that's another factor. So this is here. I've already done this. I'm not going to change my mind on that one. It just makes sense that if you have no armor, you need to have more hit points. Simple as that. Next, how do we calculate the armor class for something like this? And so for me, when I was designing the monk, one of the things that I considered was unarmored defense. So unarmored, they're not wearing armor, so there needs to be a way of sort of where do they get their armor class from. So armor class, or AC, is an abstraction. So that could be coming from dexterity plus 10. Okay, that's one formula in Shadowdark. So we could also make the formula constitution. I believe that a lot of, there's certainly a belief that the monk in 5e and the monk in previous versions of D&D was based on wisdom, like you'd connect maybe wisdom to the armor class in some way. I don't think that is the right way to go with the Elemental Warrior. I think that a Elemental Warrior is a internal energy kind of class. they're not about being wise and smart. There's plenty of wise, smart people in the world that cannot produce any kind of energy in their body. I think this is an internal thing. And what makes it interesting about it is it leans more into constitution. We very rarely see constitution used for anything outside of you get a couple more hit points or you get a few less hit points, depending on depending on how things are working for you in terms of your modifier. So I think that is probably the best way to go, is go either Dex or Constitution, but not Wisdom. You'll let me know if you feel that's a bad idea, but I think this is an internal energy warrior. Next, I took martial arts that was existing for the monk, and I've kind of just copy-pasted this. And I'm fine with copy-pasting this because you're just striking. So you can make unarmed melee strikes with your hands, feet, elbows, knees, and head. This is just like the monk that I put into the player's expansion for Shadowdark RPG. Roll a d20 plus your strength or dexterity modifier plus talent bonuses to make an attack roll. So that is how you make an attack roll. Unarmed strikes do d6 of damage. Now, for those of you who are unaware, in Shadowdark it does not state what a fist or an unarmed strike or a hand-to-hand strike in terms of how much damage it does. Some people rule, and it's not written in the book, okay, that it does 1 point of damage and you don't add anything else to that. That's in terms of damage. That's not to hit. To hit, you would be strength plus your a d20, or maybe it's dexterity plus a d20. But it's not actually spelled out in Shadowdark. So I've spelled it out here in the class so you know how to deal with that, okay? A lot of other people see an unarmed strike in terms of the core rules as you would get a D4. It's an improvised attack. You're not using a weapon, a D4. That's it. I've gone with D6 because I feel like that is sort of the mid-range in terms of the damage. I don't want it to be too low that you would never consider it an option for Shadowdark. So your average damage is going to be about 3 points to 3.5. That's sort of what you do. So there's your martial arts. That's the other aspect, I think, of the Elemental Warrior. Now we need to get into the funky stuff. And the funky stuff is the Elemental Blow. We want to put some sort of elemental energy into the blow that they perform. And I want you to be able to select what that damage is when you make a melee attack. The question is do we need to lock them down to selecting it at character creation, or should we allow them to select the energy type or the elemental type they do every time they make an attack? That is the big question, I think, because the D6, it's not a big deal in terms of damage, but being able to make it fire or electrical or cold or acid really changes up the game. I've selected these types of damage output because of the way that Shadowdark is built. Shadowdark is not connected very strongly to damage type. It doesn't really come up that much unless you're dealing with a creature that's immune to something. So, you know, if you come across a creature who's immune to fire and you hit them with a fire blow, it isn't going to do anything, right? But if you're striking a creature that is, you know, can't be harmed unless you strike with some sort of magical source, then using fire, electricity, cold, or acid would make a big difference. So we just need to make sure we have that connected in there. So unarmed strikes you make can include a specific magical energy or element. Select normal, fire, electrical, cold, or acid damage to do when you declare declare a melee attack. That's to stop people doing the retrospective thing. So that's how I would build the Elemental Blow. What does this mean? This essentially means that you now always have a magical source. It's like walking around with your fists being magic weapons, which means magic weapons are really of no use to you. Magic armor's no use to you because you can't wear it. Have I just made something that's way too strong? I think that's a legitimate question. The thing that I would counterpoint this by is the following, though. Spellcasters exist in Shadowdark. Spellcasters can get past this, whereas a martial class like the fighter can't unless they have a magical weapon and they're dealing with something, you know, a monster that has, in many respects, something that says it cannot be harmed unless it's from a magical source. Now, if you know anything about Shadowdark, you're not really supposed to be able to pick up magic weapons and so forth until you're about level 7. That's a long way off. Like magic sword, magic weapons, that is like a level 7 drop. So a level 7 monster, you might get a magic weapon off of them. But you're not going to get it before that. That's a long way. Since you go from level 1 to level 10, that's a long progression, right? So this is a big deal. This means from level 1 to level 6, the Elemental Warrior has a huge advantage over any other martial class. Because I just put the word in specific magical energy or element. That's a fact. But the other thing is that they'll never benefit from a magic weapon really because there's no point. That's another thing to consider, right? Particularly if I limit the number of weapons they have access to. That's why there's all those question marks. Okay, the next thing. This is, I think, probably the hardest bit, and this is the Elemental Blast. You fire a beam or bolt of fire, electricity. Let's go. Select normal. Fire, electrical. Okay. Electricity. Fire. Electricity, cold or acid. Okay, make a spell casting check by rolling 1d20 plus your con modifier. Now, I think what I need to do is I need to have a progression for this Elemental Blast. I also need to consider the fact that I want them to be able to lose the ability to use the Elemental Blast because it's now a ranged thing. I could wind up very easily making the Elemental Blast get lost. If it's just one thing that you get to do, you could lose that very quickly. Like you could fail and then you not get it. Is that what we want to try and do? It may not matter because the Elemental Blow, getting up close and being able to essentially do magical energy blows, is a big deal. At least until level 6 or 7. So that's another thing to consider. The blast does 1d4 damage within far range for characters level 1 to 5. The blast does 1d6 damage within far range for characters level 6 to 10. And I've based this off the fact that the wizard gets Fireball at about level 5 in Shadowdark. And I have also based it off the fact that the priest gets some pretty good spells at about that point as well. I don't want them to be as powerful in terms of their ranged essential magic. This is essentially magic, isn't it? I don't want them to be as powerful as the wizard or the priest. I think that's the wrong way to think about this. But I think this is possibly a solution. And this is why I've kind of drawn it up this way. So let's change this. This is not the monk. We're going to go with the Elemental Warrior. Elemental. I'm very interested to see what people are having to say in the chat. Okay, so we're going to do this. We'll do that. We'll come back to these. The option for 2 plus 2 points to distribute to stats and 12 being choose a talent. Those are going to be fixed. It's just the stuff in between that we'll have to fiddle around with. And then the Elemental Warrior again, the titles. That is going to take us a bit of time because there's a whole bunch to come up with. Not really looking forward to that aspect of it. I'll tell you that right now. But now that I've shown you the bulk of what I've done for this class, and you can see that, it's not as tough as it might seem, one of the things I want to do is I want to lean into the unarmed strike. I think that is the thing that we need to sort of focus in on more than anything else. This is why I've put down +1 to unarmed strike attack rolls, and then +1 to unarmed damage rolls. I want to lean into that, and I want to separate it, unlike, you know, the fighter that sort of has it all sort of baked in. I want them to be able to, I want them to focus more on kind of fighting unarmed and doing elemental damage, but still with an option to have this sort of blast at a range. Okay, that is sort of where my head is at. And you'll notice too, I use Constitution modifier. I want this to be one of those classes, like I said, which is focusing more on internal energy, and I think Constitution is more about that. I don't think this is, I think the kind of magic blast that you're essentially doing, or elemental blast that you're doing, is not a int based one, it's not a charisma based one, it's not a wisdom based one. It's really unusual. It's a con based one. I think that's where it needs to lie. That's why I built it that way. Okay. So those of you who are wondering, how did I wind up with all of this? I sat down and I looked at all of the 5e stuff. I looked at my monk, and I essentially wrote down a whole bunch of notes to sort of help get me through it. And this is essentially the piece of paper I wound up writing stuff on. Trying to figure out whether it would work or not was really difficult, honestly, because I didn't want to make it too powerful, but I didn't want it to be something that you wouldn't want to play. Is it still going to be fun? For those of you who are thinking, Mortal Kombat, Fred, where is the fatality? And if that's what you're thinking, and you're wondering why there's no fatality option, the reason there's no fatality option in this is that if you write an ability that allows you to roll either an attack roll or a stat check or a spellcasting check, and you can take somebody from whatever hit points they are and essentially kill them, you're fucked up. You've made the game too easy. You've made the class too good. So that ability can never exist. The concept, if you're trying to look for, well, what if I want my elemental warrior to kind of do fatalities? When they drop their enemy or their monster down to 0 hit points, that's when they can do something narrative that's a fatality, and they pull their spine out, or they shove their fist through their chest or something like that. I think that's how you need to look at it, as being a narrative rather than a mechanical, because if you focus on the mechanical, then the class is too good. You can't build that and legitimately think it could be playable, not without it just terrifying everything. Right? It just would be too much. Okay. Do you think Mortal Kombat can exist as a class in Shadowdark? We've got one person said yes, one person said no. I was waiting for somebody I was expecting a lot more people to say no. One undecided and just watching. So out of 4 votes. Okay, interesting, cool. Hello Jasper, how are you doing? Seems like the elemental blast mimics a magic user spell. It does, exactly it does. And it is unlimited unless you fail a check. Yes, I like unlimited unless use until fail a check. And I was thinking, well, we could have one for fire, we could have one for electricity, we could have one for acid, we could have one for cold. And then I realized, well, we've just given the elemental warrior 4 spells. And it's now really essentially a damage dealing spellcaster. It's low level damage, of course, in terms of its ranged blast. And I've actually thought, well, actually, that's probably not the way to go. I think the way to go is keep the failure in, and you get this one ability which you can change the energy type of. That's fine. But when you fail it, you will have to go and have a rest to get it back. Otherwise, its ranged elemental blast is going to be too good. It is going to be too good. It's leaning far too close into the break the game thing. Channeling elemental power through your body sounds like Constitution. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Jasper. Oh, by the way, Jasper is a patron. Thanks for being here, Jasper. One of the talents should be bonus to armor class. I had thought about that, and I am not really convinced of that at all, and I'll explain to you why. One of the things I discovered when I've been playing Shadowdark, this game, is there is the fighter class has a feature, and in that feature there's a talent that allows you to increase your armor class on a particular type of armor, right? One of the talents basically states something like this: choose one kind of armor. So in this case you don't wear armor, so it would just be stacked to your armor class full stop. You get +1 AC from that armor. Now it doesn't really matter because attaching it to a particular type of armor people are going to do. But what I've discovered is it is possible in Shadowdark to wind up rolling that option for the fighter talent multiple times and wind up with a stupidly high armor class, which means it could also happen for the likes of an elemental monk. And having really high armor class in Shadowdark, since it's a much more bound system, is actually a really bad idea. It is one of the things that I have issues with because you can get it multiple times. It certainly makes your fighter distinct from everybody else's if you have a really high armor class, like you manage to push it up to a 20 wearing plate mail and having a shield, or even beyond that, which does happen. Believe it or not, it is possible in Shadowdark to have that happen. I think armor class is the wrong way to go. I think we still need to make our elemental warrior squishy, but we need to be able to add in something that has a bit of meat and potatoes to it that would be interesting in some way. And I think the answer to that is to lean into giving a bonus to their spellcasting check, so you've got a better chance of actually pulling it off. I think that is probably the solution in terms of one of the talents, and we lean into the unarmed strike. That would be my thoughts on that. But otherwise I would have put it in. When I was going through this, I would have let's just make armor class one of the talents that you have. But it is one of my least favorite things to have happen, is the armor class going too high. Because there are a few characters in my game who are now level 9 who I can't hit unless I roll a 20. It's just too good. Believe it or not, it's not a big deal. The reality is that you want things to be squishy. Squishy is fine, and a lot of the time there aren't ways of increasing armor class. The only class that can really increase their armor class is the fighter in the core rules, like the wizard, the priest, and the thief cannot really increase their armor class. There's no way to do that. So the elemental warrior is sitting in the same place as all of them, and a priest can be in the front line and be fine. They wear armor, okay? They wear armor, but and then also too, a thief can be in the front row, and yet they can wear armor. Their armor's not that great, but they can still be in the front line. It's really only the fighter that's really good at being up close. But priests get really good armor class, but they only get a D6 for their hit points. That's why the hit points are so high. And the thief gets D4 for their hit points, but they get access to leather armor or mithril armor, and you should never give mithril armor out in Shadowdark. I can tell you right now, it's a really bad idea. Not unless they're really, really high level. It's just too good, right? But you think about it, leather armor. Leather armor is not that great. Leather armor essentially means you get 11 plus your dex modifier. Remember, the formula for armor class in Shadowdark is 10 plus your dex modifier. It's only an increase of 1, and the thief can't change that at all. It's just going to stay there. This is why I think playing with armor class with the elemental warrior is a bad idea. But then they don't have any other abilities that they could gain. No, they will be. I'll put one in. They won't get their attack bonus. They won't get ability bonuses. Yeah, they will, let me show you what I think we probably should do, okay? And this will probably make it a little bit easier to understand. So I went through that same thought process as you, Jasper, when I was looking at this. And I had put it, initially I had put it down, which is why there's a full stop there. I literally, that was my thoughts, is like, okay, let's do that. And then in the end I decided, okay, that's actually not going to work. The reality is we need to look at this very, very differently. So what I've done is I've got here +2 bonus to distribute to stats. It's pretty standard for most classes. Choose a talent, pretty standard. So +1 to unarmed strike attack rolls. I want to distinguish that, so that increases your chance to hit. This one increases your damage output. Okay, that's your talent bonus, basically. You could add your talent bonus, so we've got that. And then the last one, which we need to fill in and need to decide what it's going to be. Let's feed it into the elemental blast. Okay, so it goes +1 to spell casting checks. I think that is the easiest way to build our talent tree, essentially, or talent table. And that will lead into our elemental blast, which, you know, probably is going to fail at some point. We could go with a +1. We could even include advantage. Like, I'm not against the idea of doing, okay, you roll 2 dice if you get this ability, and, you know, you re-roll other, you know, anything else. Like, there is precedence in Shadowdark for that. So, for example, if I find the priest, it says here, gain advantage on one casting of one spell you know. Okay, gain advantage on casting one spell that you know. So quite often people, when they get this one, they put it onto their cure wounds, because cure wounds in Shadowdark is so important, right? But that is an option that you could potentially roll. We could do something like that for this, and just make it connected to your elemental blast, and just you have advantage. If you roll a 10 to 11, you get that. And then, you know, if they roll it again, then you just re-roll duplicates. We just put in a re-roll duplicate line. That would be fine. I don't think that's an issue at all. Another way we could look at this and is the not the thief, but in terms, since this is kind of like casting spell, right? There is another one here that is for the wizard. And on the table, it's an 8 to 9, roll 8 to 9, gain advantage on casting one spell you know. So quite often with something like that, if depending on when you get it, you're never going to really put it on Magic Missile, because Magic Missile always gives you advantage on the spell casting check. What you can do, though, is you can put it on a spell you think you know that you're going to use often. If you wind up picking it up when you have Fireball, people will apply it to Fireball, because Fireball and Firebolt are your go-to spells for a wizard once you get to that point where you can cast them, which is level 5, right? But before that, things like Burning Hands can be really useful. But, you know, if you're more utilitarian, Detect Magic might be the one that you decide you're going to select, so you don't wind up failing that. It always sucks when you can't detect magic and you're still having to keep moving. So we could do this and go +1, or we could go advantage. And I don't think, honestly, that it makes too much of a I don't think it's going to make it too overpowered. So gain, it is a 10 to 11, so the chance is not great. Advantage, on spell casting checks. You only cast one spell on spell casting checks. So that's it. There we go. So that would be our talent table. And now we need to start thinking about weapons. What weapons, if any, because you'll notice that none of their talents tie into their weapons. So if we give them a dagger, they're only ever going to get a D4. That's it. It's going to be built exactly the same. Whether you get these are all, this is all built around that elemental blast and the elemental blow and the martial arts. It is not built around using weapons, but we could still give them weapons. So what would be the weapons in your head for an elemental warrior? What would be some sort of reasonably acceptable options for an elemental warrior? Let's go with something like, I think we go with the ones that aren't super powerful, so you don't feel like they are the things you should definitely take. So we've got the short sword, we've got a dagger. A dagger is a D4. Short sword, you could use a short sword if you wanted to. You're probably better off to just punch something because it's the same amount of damage, and you can change the damage type because you're an elemental warrior. So there's not a huge advantage. A long sword is going to do more damage by about 1 point, but you can't change the damage type. So we could still do that one. Long sword. It's not a huge jump. Okay. I would stay away from the Warhammer and anything that is much more specialized in terms of a fighter, because then your first, unless you feel like you need to do elemental energy with your punches, you're not going to do it, right? So I would go with leave the Warhammer alone. Forget about the staff because it's not necessarily that exciting. But it's probably not broken. We could put the staff in. Okay, let's put the staff in. And then short sword. I'm fine with the short bow because it's a D4. So ultimately, if you fire a bow and you can't, you run out of elemental blast because you can't cast anymore, you would have a bow. Okay, so you can use a bow. It's going to do the same amount of damage as the bow at level 1 to 10, 1 to 5. But this is magical, right? You fire a beam. You fire a beam of a magical beam or bolt of fire. So we've got that. So we'll make sure it's clear that it is magical, and so the short bow wouldn't be a terrible idea. So if you lose that and you wanted to make ranged attacks, you could use the short bow. What I don't think we should do is give them the long bow. I think that would be a bad idea. So we can give them a short bow. Short bow, short bow, short. Short bow, staff. Okay. Mace is a D6. I don't want to necessarily give them everything, but I don't want to take too much stuff away from them either. Mace, we can put the mace in. The mace is only what? It's a D6. So it's not really a big deal. You're going to be doing probably better off with just punching stuff rather than using a mace. But you could use a mace if you wanted to. It's really not that necessary. In fact, in many respects, it's almost... I almost feel like these are unnecessary things for an elemental warrior. Now that I think about it. Like, why would you bother having a dagger? Yeah, you know how to use a dagger, but why would you? Mace. This is one of those problems where, like, are we including things that don't actually add anything to the class when it'd be better just to smash things with your fist? The club. Long sword, longbow, club, crossbow. Not going to do the crossbow. Dagger, bastard sword. No. Okay, so let's leave these in for now. But I think I definitely want to question whether we even need to bother with this, because honestly, short of having the short bow accessible, why would you use these? It wouldn't make any sense. But that gives you a couple of weapons that you could have access to. That wouldn't be like, they're not going to be wind up being better than what you can do as part of your class. Okay, so that's that. That's one aspect of it. Okay, now let's go down. I think that's all pretty good the way it is. I just want to check to make sure I have written up my elemental blast in a way that is going to be clear enough. Do I need to state anything else? I don't think I do. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Right. Okay, so that is that aspect. I need to have a line in here to re-roll. So 10 to 11 re-roll duplicates. Okay. That's that. Okay, so now we're going to be doing that in a second, but let's get the narrative of what the heck this thing is. You'll notice too that a lot of the features that the Elemental Warrior has, they're all combat. Yeah? Whereas, you know, if you think in terms of the other classes that we've got in the core rules, like the Wizard has languages and then it casts spells. So languages is a non-combat thing, right? And then if we look at, say, the thief has backstab, which is combat, and then it has thievery, and it has all these other things that are auxiliary and related to exploration, and this class doesn't have that. So there's another consideration we need to look at as well. And then if you take that into consideration again, and we look at the priest gets languages and turn undead, which is a combat one, but the languages isn't, and then it casts spells. And then the fighter, which you'd think would just be about fighting, well, it's a hauler, so it gets to increase, lift more stuff. So it gets hauler, and then it gets weapon mastery, which is all strength based, right? And they also get grit. So they do have some non-combat related abilities. So my general feeling is that maybe what I should do is I should wrap this whole ability together into that and just call it Elemental Blow. That might be a smarter way. Let's do that. Because we've given them a bunch of stuff. Let's forget about it calling it that. Drop this in here, paste. And then there we go, Elemental Blow. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3. So we've got 3 things going on. Most classes have about 3 things at the most. Priest has 2 because it's spellcaster. Thief has 1, 2 different things, but their thievery covers a lot of stuff. So we're kind of heavy on the combat aspect. Is there something we could add to our Elemental Warrior that isn't combat related, that's going to fulfill a different aspect of the game? I think that is our weakest point here that I have not actually figured out. So it's something to consider. Yeah? This is actually, I had this discussion with one of my friends, Simon, a while back, and he said, got to be careful when designing classes that they don't wind up being all combat related features, and I've kind of done that already right now. So we've got to figure out how to solve that. Okay, so grit, duplicate. Yeah, so that's not a dumb idea actually. That might actually be something to consider. I'm not against that idea, giving advantage on like grit, but not doing it dexterity and not doing it strength. That could have its place. Let's have a look here. You've got a whole bunch of very interesting ideas here, Jasper. So for those of you who don't know, Jasper does a lot of designing for basic D&D or BECME D&D, designing classes and other stuff. So, which is probably why he's got so much feedback in here. Elemental Blast damage dice instead of automatic at 6th level. Elemental Blast may be increased damage die instead of automatic at 6th level. Oh, you mean as a talent? I don't know that that's a good idea. I think it's probably better to just base it off level. I had this problem with the Warlock, and it still exists in that class that I made, and I've seen other people doing it. I think it's actually probably better to simply change the blast damage when you get to a certain from level 6 to 10. There are things that I love about Shadowdark class design, and there are some things that I think are still faulty, that are leaning too heavily on 5e or too heavily on randomness. Do you know what I mean? There's the whole idea is to try to make it so the class cannot be optimized, have the fun optimized out, right? So yeah, I would combine +2 to stats and choose a talent into 12 like the other classes. I don't agree. I looked at that and I thought, I think that is a mistake. I really never liked that option, because you know what it is. You know what the problem is. When I looked at that, when I saw the other classes, and I was wondering why she was doing that, I was thinking, well, if I roll a 12 with my 2 6-sided dice for the talent roll, what's the most likely aspect or thing that I'm going to pick out of the two things? If I roll a 12, choose a talent or add +2 points to distribute to stats. Well, I'm always going to go with the choose talent. Now, that might mean that I wind up going with a +2 to distribute to stats, but if I'm playing a fighter, I get already a +2 to strength, dexterity, or constitution stat if I roll a 7 or a 9. And if I'm dealing with rolling a 3 to a 6 on this fighter talent table, if I get a +1 to melee and ranged attacks, like that essentially means that I'm getting almost fundamentally another stat boost to dexterity and to strength, both of them at the same time. So I actually looked at that and I thought, well, no, that's probably. I feel like it's redundant, which is why I didn't put it in there. It's why I separated them out. Anyway, but I understand where your head is going with this. I would also combine the +1 to attacks and damage, but to have players choose which they would prefer. I don't think so. I'm not hot on that idea. I know where you're going with this. Do you know why? It is the more options you give in the talent table, more chance of variation, right? But there are certain things that wind up being no-brainers. Like, if you give a choice between, do I get more damage or do I get a better attack? Players tend to go with, because it's a bound system. So to give you an idea, think about it this way. If I make a choice, you get a +1 to attack, or I get a +1 to damage. Which one is the player going to choose if they get that choice on the talent table? Which one are they more likely to take? And I will say to you, it's always going to be the +1 to damage. Do you know why? Bound accuracy is a real thing in Shadowdark. Monster's armor class does not go up. Monster armor class is actually quite low. You don't have to have a high number for your attack bonus to hit your target. Hitting your target is actually quite easy. So the best option, if you roll that and have to make a choice, is to always go with damage, which is why I separated them. Does that make sense? It wasn't obvious to me until I started playing the game, but then it became really obvious. Then you have one talent to be gain +2 to strength, dex, or con. That's essentially the fighter talent. You just described the fighter talent there. The one with gain advantage with an elemental bolt, if you haven't already done that one. Yeah, I've got that one. That's there. 2 gain advantage with elemental bolt. Yeah, we've got it already. 3. Okay, I see what you're redistributing it +1 to attack or damage. No, it's not. I don't think that's a good idea. I've just explained it why. I see here you're moving things around, but yeah, I've done all of these things before, and it's not until you actually start mucking around with things that you realize what's going on. I like the crossbow, don't like the long sword. You reckon the crossbow? I don't know that the crossbow's a great idea though. Why the crossbow? What in your head says Elemental Warrior should have a crossbow rather than a short bow? Crossbow, not a short bow. Curious. I don't think it really matters. I could put the crossbow in there and I think it would be just fine. Like, you know, big deal, crossbow. I don't feel like it's a huge issue. Crossbow. Let's just add it anyway. It's not, honestly, I don't think it's a big deal, but I'll put it in. You don't like the longsword? I'm putting in the longsword because it is such a common weapon. Like why you wouldn't have it is kind of weird. Like why would you not include it as something that you could use? Why not mimic grit? Now this is the idea that I'm really interested in, is the mimicking grit. Because mimicking grit is such a smart idea. Fred has been trying to get me to work on Shadowdark. Yeah, I have. And you are today. You have done a lot of work. You can change everything that I just did, by the way. I agree with always going to choose a talent. But as you see, I fill in the rest of the talents. Yeah. Remember, I have no real experience of Shadowdark, but I am comparing what I have done with what is already... Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm not going to give you a hard time, because all those things that you were suggesting are the first things that I was thinking I should do. It wasn't until I started playing the game that I started to realize that by giving a person an option in the talent tables, like going, you can have +1 to this or you can have +1 to that, is such a stupid thing to do. Going, a talent option that says you get +2 to strength, dexterity, or constitution stat. It's just not as clean as you just get to add +2 points to distribute to stats, and you just decide where they go, right? It's cleaner, and it's pretty much covering exactly what's going to happen with that class anyway. Most people are going to stick it either into strength, dexterity, or constitution. It was kind of duplicating itself, which is why I ripped that idea out, and I've just got one option that increases your stats by +2. And that's it. You know what I mean? Can be used without any training. Yes, that's true. Well, that's true. That's why they incorporate it, right? I think it's 3-month training, actually. It's not no training. You can use a crossbow. You won't hit very much. But I believe it's a 3-month training process to learn how to use a crossbow properly. Whereas it's 10 years for the longbow. So that's a lot harder to deal with. I don't see this subclass that can punch with fire and shoot with ice spending any time training with a longsword. And that's true. I agree with that too. In fact, it's hard to see it training with any weapons. Like, why would you bother? But yeah. No, I don't disagree with that at all. Which is why when I'm putting in the weapons, it almost feels like it's somewhat pointless, frankly. Somewhat pointless. So we need to give them a non-combat thing that they can do, which is going to be hard. I don't think it's going to be difficult to nail down. Easy to nail down. I think it's going to be really, really difficult to nail down. But we need something that we can use that could incorporate that. And I don't know exactly what it would be. Small hand, staff, small hand weapons. To be fair, when I was learning martial arts, unarmed fighting, we always learned how to use the longsword because it's the most common weapon to pick up. And the dagger, a knife, very common thing to learn. Staff, absolutely. Those sorts of things definitely were on our cards. Those were things we learned to use, even since we were doing a lot of unarmed fighting, right, in the martial arts. Hashtag, how do we make a non-combat feature for the Elemental Warrior? And that is my question. I'm going to put this forward. So would that be advantage on constitution checks? The question is why? You know, I guess the question is why? Because I almost feel like it's going to wind up going in the same place, no matter what. Anyway, so yeah, there's a question. Let me at least write up a description of this class so we kind of got an idea of what the heck it is. So back to our Google Doc. Oops. One of the things I've discovered is Shadowdark classes are easier to make, but they're not super simple. Like that, it's not like when you make them, you'll look at them and think, oh, that was easy. I could do that. No problems. There's no problems whatsoever. It's always going to be something I can manage. They are easier than 5e, but they're not a piece of cake, which is why I'm showing you what I have to go through. Okay, so let's deal with what is this class actually all about. Since I've drawn a lot of it from the Way of the Four Elements in 5e, the monk from that, let's have a look and see how we can build this. I think we need to use the word martial artist. No, forget about that. Martial artist who has mastered controlling their internal energy to release it as I guess devastating blows and blasts. Okay, so we've got that little aspect of it. What else is there that we can do this? I think a martial artist who has mastered controlling their internal energy to release it as devastating blows and blasts. As different let's use the word elemental. Devastating. Okay. As devastating elemental blows and blasts. We're going to get rid of this. I think we've said most of what we need. We need a little bit more. I haven't figured out what that would be, but that is at least my first sentence for this class and where I think the core of it is sitting at. So yeah. So as a martial artist, the things that we learnt when I was learning self-defense was the staff. Never learned to use the bow. We did use the short sword, the long sword, the dagger, chain, but there's no chain in Shadowdark, so that wouldn't be a thing. Yeah, dagger was a knife. Was there anything else? Oh, yeah, tonfa, nunchucks. Neither of those actually exist in Shadowdark, so I don't think that's really something to worry about. but those would be the key ones that we definitely used a lot. So those are definitely ones that I think should definitely be there. The crossbow and the short bow are the long stretches because they're not things that we normally covered. You didn't usually set that up in the dojo and start shooting arrows around the place. Didn't matter what it was with. Throwing stars, not really a thing either. Throwing stars is something else. Okay, so let's have a look at this elemental way of the 4 elements and see if I can't piece together something from that. Okay, so you follow a tradition that teaches you to harness the elements. Okay, when you focus your ki, well, we're not using ki. You can align yourself with the forces of creation and bend the 4 elements to your will. Use them as an extension of your body. Some members of the tradition dedicate themselves to a single element. Others weave the elements together. I think we keep it open so you can mix and match and play around with your elements. So you get to pick as you feel like it might be necessary. I don't want to hamstring the elemental warrior to, you must select an energy type to focus on and that is it. If that's how you wind up playing their character, that's fine, but I don't think that's the best way to go with this. It's not like when you build your class, you're becoming Sub-Zero or you're becoming Scorpion necessarily. You know, it's not exactly like that. Many monks of this tradition tattoo their bodies with representations of their key power. Okay, commonly imagined as coiling dragons, also as phoenixes, fishes, plants, mountains, and cresting waves. Maybe there is something we could do with having advantage on a specific type of check. And not a constitution check, but like a knowledge check. Because if you understand your body in some way, and you understand how to do that and bring it forth as a physical phenomenon, maybe there's something we can do with that. That's maybe the place we need to go with this other ability, right? What else? Discipline. The elements of the, so this is that disciple of the elements. When you choose, okay, forget about this bit. Let's get to actual stuff. Casting spells, forget about that. We're not doing that. We've got our one launchy spell, and that's it. This is just Breath of Winter. Breath of Winter? What? Clench of the North? No. None of these are interesting. Elemental Attunement. Now this might be something we can use. You can use your action to benefit, briefly control elemental forces nearby, causing one of the following effects of your choice. This might be what we're after. Here we go. Create a harmless sensory effect related to air, earth, fire, or water, such as a shower of sparks, a puff of wind, a spray of light mist, or a gentle rumble of stone. Instantly light or snuff out a candle, a torch. Okay. So my general feeling is that would be to control it in some way, but we're controlling energy in ourselves to produce the thing. But this could wind up being leading more into what's the best way to describe this? This could wind up leading more into another combat thing. So we've got to be careful about how we do this. So this doesn't work because this is just giving you stone skin. That's just more combat stuff. This is just more key points. Thunder wave, forget about that. Fangs of the fish, key point. What does it do? Nothing particularly interesting, frankly. 10 feet, so that's just increasing range. More combat stuff, more combat stuff. Fireball. None of this is very interesting. I think this is where we are going to struggle a little bit, is coming up with something that is non-combat-ishy, and I would certainly like to be able to do so. I am all right with there being this one, and this one, and one more. But whatever else we put in here, it needs to be around the thing that we're after. So knowledgeable, nature. Okay, here we go. Elemental expert. Let's try that. And let's go with something like you have advantage on checks related to fire. Whoopsies. You have advantage on checks related to knowing to you have advantage on knowledge checks related to fire. Electricity. That's not right. What was the other one? Electricity. Water. That's an element, right? Water. That would include ice and the cold. What else is it? What's the other elements? Because it's elemental. There's 4 elements, right? Oh, earth. And wind. Air. Could we do that? That might be our go-to. Let's go with the 5th element. Let's go the 5th element way. Let's include spirit here and spirits. How's that? That's a pretty beefy ability. It is non-combat related. Elemental expert. I like it. Oh, it's not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that. That's not a bad way to go about solving the problem that we had before. Do I feel like it's too much? Probably not, actually, because you consider what the thief gets in terms of having advantage and stuff. Like, they get a bunch of stuff. They get heaps and heaps of things. I think that'll work fine, actually, when I think about it. Yeah, why not? Okay, let's have a look and see what we've got here. Jasper's really giving me lots and lots of feedback. Mental and physical discipline for grit ability. I reckon we... I don't know. I still like what I just wrote. Monks in D&D have always had bonuses and immunities from different types of attacks. Yes, but this is not a monk. This is not the monk as such. Like, do you know what I mean? And also, one of the things that I always found really frustrating that I didn't see in the design for D&D when it comes to monks, since I was a practicing martial artist for many, many years, not anymore. And one of the things that they never understood is attacks of opportunity and opportunity attacks. And then the design around the monk has always been kind of fucked up. Like, it didn't make any sense. And it was like that. It's been like that for years. So when I had an opportunity to do something with it, I gave my monk fighting styles, because that's essentially one of the aspects of a warrior monk is like fighting styles. It's a really important aspect, and you just don't duplicate that at all. So bonuses and immunities. Immunities, you can't give a class immunities from different types of attacks. You can't give any class an immunity that says you can't be hurt by this. That is just not going to work in the game. Moving faster, I don't know that we need to make them move fast. Here's the problem with moving faster in Shadowdark. These are the range increments that you have. You have close, which is 5 feet. Then you have near, which is anything that's more than 5 feet up to 30 feet. Most things move near in terms of their range increment, which is about 30 feet, right? Then from that one, you have double near. Double near is more than 30 feet, but up to 60 feet. Very few things move that quickly. Like, it doesn't come up that often. And no class has those, and no ancestry. I made an ancestry that does have that, the centaur, but the monsters generally move double near. Never move far, because that's like teleporting, right? But there's a real problem with building, I think, into a class something that allows you to move faster than near, because it's too quick. I know it works maybe for 5e. I honestly think it's probably a bloody terrible idea. It is probably not the right way to go. It is not something like, as training as a martial artist, it is not like if you train as a martial artist, you can run faster than everybody else. It's based off some ludicrous thing, probably from mythology and legend and stories. It's got, it doesn't have to be based on reality, but I don't know where the hell it comes from. It's weird that people assume that monks would move really fast by like running like the $6 Million Man. It's weird that we have to focus on that one. It's not something that we ever really did. We would do running drills, but it's not like we were any faster than anybody else. I really like them having advantage against certain things. Poison, ESP, telepathy, maybe they can add this with a talent. No, I think we leave that alone. ESP, telepathy, I don't think we give them telepathy. I think that's probably a bad idea. Monks and D&D are full or combat abilities here, and which is why I'm looking for something that's a little bit different, and it needs to be elementally based, right? Acrobatics like thievery, I suppose you could say, yeah, let's make them more acrobatic, but is an elemental warrior really acrobatic, or are they more about the elements? Are we going somewhere else? I almost feel like the acrobat, in terms of the unarmed, or the warrior monk, or the warrior that uses martial arts, when we talk about acrobatics, I think we're leaning more into ninja, because they're very acrobatic. Their training is very acrobatic. The way that they do stuff is very acrobatic. And there are styles of martial arts that are very acrobatic, but most of them aren't. Acrobatics, but it's not something that you could, it's just, how would you tie it in? Acrobatics would have mechanically almost no effect on the game in Shadowdark, because there's no attack of opportunity. Being able to do a flip is not going to be that much of an advantage to you. Acrobatics is not a skill in Shadowdark. It's just dexterity checks. It's probably not going to come into the game that much. Whereas I think what we've got is very specific, but it's going to come up at some point, because anyway. Monks and D&D are full R's instead of the T and F's. R instead of F. Oh, okay. Now I want to finish my BX monk and maybe make one for Shadowdark. So I made one for Shadowdark already. So I've already been through the pain of trying to figure out how to make a monk for Shadowdark that would work. So now this is the elemental warrior, which is another animal in itself. The problem is now we've got to come up with talents. Titles. What are we going to use for titles for an elemental warrior? Hashtag. What are the titles we use for the elemental warrior? Titles. Here we go. This is going to be a difficult one. I can see it now. Because at its core, that is not an easy question to answer. I've never found the talents, the titles for these class creation things to be easy in any way, shape, or form. They're always difficult to figure out. So, back to the elemental warrior. We've got a few things here that, and I don't expect this to be perfect. This is like a first draft, guys. We're getting started. So a martial artist who has mastered controlling their internal energy to release it as devastating elemental blows and blasts. I think that's good enough. We've got that bit, we've got that bit, we've got our elemental expert. I kind of like the idea. They're probably going to come across things that are lightning, electricity, fire, water, earth, air, spirits, so that they'll be able to do other things other than just fight. They've got a different formula for their armor class. It might be Dex, it might be Con. Adding with the calculation, it'll be one of those. For those of you who are wondering, are there people who are running around with an armor class of 12 in Shadowdark? Yes, there are. Are there people running around with a armor class of 12 or 13 in Shadowdark and they are in the front row? Yes, they are. That happens. It definitely happens. You're not just wizards that are doing that. Okay? It definitely happens. Okay, so let's go down here. And then we've got to figure out how to make these titles work. Lawful, chaotic, neutral. And we're talking about elements. Elemental. The it's not really Thesaurus, is it? Okay. Let's see if we can do this the easy way. Elemental, environmental. It's not going to work, is it? Because if I use elemental, it's kind of, it's not going to work that way. Titles is going to be so hard to figure out. Primordial, primitive, primordial. What's another way that we could look at this? What are the elements? Earth, water, air, fire. Okay. Earth, water, air, fire, and then if we think earth, water, air, fire, and then spirit is at the top as the last one, those are 5 increments, aren't they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So can I cheat? I could cheat a little bit here, couldn't I? I could go in here and include the element for each one. Which is the easiest element to master and learn? I would say let's go with earth. So let's go earth. And let's see if we can't get something. Globe. World, clay, loom, topsoil, terrain. Oh, that's what it is. That's what we not thesaurus, but in different languages. Earth and yeah, let's do that. That will work. We can take these and we can drop them in, and we'll be fine, right? Let's do that. Including Talos, Gaia, and Terra. Let's go with Terra. Talos. Let's go Talos as first. Paste. Okay. I'm moving now. Gaia. Terra is neutral. Gaia, I think we're going to make lawful. Let's go, I don't know if this is going to work. I always find titles and creating titles for Shadowdark really difficult. It's not an easy process. Terra. Okay, so that's Earth. After Earth, the next hardest one to master would be water. Okay, so let's go with water. Water. And H2O, right? No. Water. Oh, let's go with water god. No, that's going to be too much in the nose. Maybe this is going to wind up being too much in the nose. Talus, Terran. What about water spirit? Isn't there a thing called, what is it called? The airbending and firebending. Don't they have a cartoon? What the hell is it called? What about water bending ranks? Novice to master. Water bending ranks. Oh, Avatar. Let's treat it like that. Water bending. But are there ranks to it? Oh, there are. Let's pick a few of these. Yeah, small details. Some of the top water bend. Oh, that's not the ranks. This is okay. Highest levels of water bending. Blood bending. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, that's not going to help me in the slightest, is it? Glass bending, water bending. No, it's a trail that'll lead me nowhere in particular. That isn't going to help me, unfortunately. That is unfortunate, completely unfortunate. Anyway, here we go. Yeah, I'm not too sure how I'm supposed to make this work. This is going to be much more difficult than I thought. Okay, let's keep moving. So we did earth. We want to do water. All right, let's just put in some place markers that'll help me figure out what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go water, different names for water, then air would be the next one. I don't know what that would be. There's got to be something, but I'm not too sure. Air, and then it goes fire. Spirit. Okay, so there's our structure. I just need to figure out how to make this work. Lawful is like good, isn't it? Can I type in good water, evil water, neutral water, and will I get different things that are sort of related to them? Maybe I will. Will that help me? Yeah. If you hadn't noticed, no matter how hard making classes, doing titles for your Shadowdark is the worst. I hate this part of the game. Just throwing, yes, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly like that, Jasper. You're just throwing stuff at the wall. Channeler, blaster, fire breather, controller, elemental weaver. Okay, so you got some naturalist. Okay, so that's okay. So channeler, weaver. You got a few ideas there I could use. Yeah, you are very much ahead of me. Last Airbender has the elements of learning in this order. Oh, water, earth, fire, and then air. Oh, does it? I just changed the order then. It ain't going to matter in the slightest, is it? Monster names that would work. Harnesser, naturalist. Yeah, it's really difficult. Like, this is one of the hardest parts of doing this sort of thing, is always when it comes down to doing the titles. I always find this is the hardest one. So I totally agree. I've seen all your ideas though, and I'm still wonder if maybe can I get away with doing a search like that and it will give me what I want? Would it be as simple as that? I don't believe that it is, but I really wish it was. So let's go with water. Good. What does that mean? Water, good. Something like that. I don't know. High quality, pure. Equine. Well, could we go equine? Is that a word? Equine. I think we do equine for lawful. Water. Oh, pus. That's better. Okay. So equine. And then if I go, I don't know, will this work? This is weird. Water, evil. Theosaurus. I don't know what I'm going to get. Evil water described as contaminated, polluted. Bad water, dangerous, rotting water. Defiled, corrupted, toxic, unadulterated. What about defiler? Tainted? Tainted. Yeah. Dear. This is the sort of nonsense. Neutral water. What is neutral water? Doesn't exist because it doesn't make any bloody sense what I'm doing anyway. That's why it doesn't exist. Common liquid, tears, saliva. Neutral water and the Theosaurus. And partial, unbalanced, balanced. Ah. What's that? Let's go with what's the word am I looking for? Is it balanced? Is it jeez balanced? I don't know. Ambient, balanced, moderate, mild, lukewarm, none of those. Balancer. Bugger if I know. Okay, all right, so all right, let's try another one. Air. Air. What the heck is air? Air could be anything. Air. Let's try that. Still, impractical, neutral, airless. None of this is going to work. Fancy name for air. A drifter? A drafter? Is that what we call them? A drafter. Drafter in the wind. Fucking hell. Here we go. Sorry, people. Drafter, heavens, puff, smoke. What about evil? What's evil ear? Evil. Tempest? Toxic. What is a... tempest. Is that it? Violent wind or storm. There, we're tempest. You're a tempest. You're a nasty one. The tempest. There we go. There, we put the tempest in there. That's the airy one. Tempest. Paste. How am I doing for time? Well, I'm running out of time, but this is hugely entertaining. Good. What's good ear? Oh, God. What is good ear? Fresh, pure, healthy. Oh, good Lord. Wind, draft, blast, heavens, atmosphere, breeze. What's a cool name for air? Yeah, give me that. Atmosphere, breeze, blast, heavens, ozone, puff, ventilation, ventilator, troposphere. No. It's not an aroma. It's only good if it's got an aroma. Frankly, ear. Let's just go ear thesaurus. I don't know what that's supposed to do, but anyway, let's just have a look. Quality, mood, aura, flavor. None of that makes sense. None of this. None of this really makes sense, frankly. In the air. A fancy name for it. We've already been down here. We didn't. Waft, zephyr, stratosphere. A fancy word for semblance of air. I don't know. Aura. I don't know. Aura. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this like I said, this is the the worst part of trying to figure out this nonsense is trying to do titles. Fire. Fire. Evil. What's evil fire? Like, is this evil fire? Inferno. Hellfire. And Inferno's not a bad idea. Inferno's not a stupid way to go. Let's go with Inferno. Let's do that one. Fire. Flamer, I guess. I'm really stretching people. Confirmation. No. Hellfire. Corrupting fire. Baleful fire. Sinister fire. Unholy fire. Incinerator. Okay. Let's go with here neutral. What's neutral fire? What do we got? Blazer. Inferno, we've already got bonfire. Blazer. Got flamer. Blazer. Inferno. Okay, alright. Oh dear. Let's go with the last one. We're dealing with spirit now. Spirit might be easier because spirit can have neutral, evil, good. What is neutral spirit? Impartial, detached, impassioned, spirit. And we're dealing with elemental, like this. That's the problem, is dealing with. It's not going to make a lot of sense. It really isn't. There's very little here that is going to make any kind of sense whatsoever in terms of elemental. Let's try evil. Evil should be good, right? Evil should be an easy one. Demon, devil, imp, evil spirit, Lucifer, Satan. We're not doing with that. Apparition. Other word for elemental. Let's try that. No, deity, primordial. I can see celestial. What was the other one that we had here? There was primordial. Primordial. Oh, there we go. And then primordial, and then she's, I don't know, last one. Demigod, read it. Supernatural, no, elements, forces. Primordial. let's take this out. Let's stick this here. Cut, paste. Blah, 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 blah. Oh my. That is all I can sort of wrap my head around with trying to do the titles. That is not brilliant. I'll tell you that now. Not my finest hour at all. But trust me, the hardest part is the titles. It's always coming up with titles for this. It's always a pain in the butt. Remember what we learned last time. When in doubt, use finish. Yeah, or different languages. I like aura. You like aura? Good. We got aura. Okay, kind of goes with spirit. Yeah, it does. Inferno, I thought Inferno works really well with chaotic fire stuff. Please don't go with flamer. Okay, so if I'm not going to use flamer, it's got to be something else. Blazer, flamer, it's got to be something else. What's it going to be, though? That's the question. You had some ideas before. It's slang here, and what's flamer? I don't even know what a flamer is. You remember, I'm in New Zealand. And to be fair, in many respects, I could not give a toss about American slang and a lot of the crazy stuff that people think about over there. Myself, I've got enough crazy nonsense going on in my own country. I don't need to take on board the stuff from another country. But why is flamer so bad? Last Airbender, harnesser, naturalist, blaster, fire breather, blaster. I could see blaster as fire, blaster, blazer, blaster. Blaster is sort of, it could be anything, couldn't it? Yeah, that could be just about me. Flamboyant gay man. What's wrong with that? Are you saying that anybody who's a flamboyant gay man would be offended that I've put flamer as a title down on Elemental Warrior titles, or that anybody who's trying to play this and who's American would not want to have that title off their character? Is that what you're saying? Smelter. Smelter? Smelter. Smelter. I'll put in smelter. There we go. Yeah. They're just words. I had this discussion at my own workplace just recently when they're changing the name of my workplace from the gated community to Riverside, and I was like, oh, it sounds like a rest home. Oh, you're a rest home now. Anyway, yeah, okay, so I think we've got most of it. To be fair, I think might go over some of this, but I think the vast majority of it is kind of done for today. I will put it up on the Patreon paid tier, not the free tier, and you can grab it, change it, use it as it is, make some changes, not make some changes. It's up to you. I couldn't care less. I will test it at some point. I haven't tested it, obviously. I've just written it. It's just throwing stuff at a wall. But we've got everything that we kind of needed. And I'm hoping that next week I will have some idea what the heck I should do next. I don't know, really. It's not as easy as it sounds like, oh, let's make a class. I thought it would be that way, but I often do this. I set projects for myself that are insane. This is one of them. Okay. Okay, I think that's the end of that. I've got that all down, noted. Let's end this poll. 5 votes. So, we have, I don't think this class will wind up being overpowered, but won't know till we put it to the table. Do you think Mortal Kombat can exist as a class in Shadowdark RPG? No. 40% out of 5 votes. 20, yes. undecided 20, just watching 20. I wouldn't say that's definitive in any way, but I was expecting there to be more no's than yeses, because I guess when you think Mortal Kombat, you think overpowered superhero, and overpowered superhero in Shadowdark seems to be like the thing you would not have. But what I've found is, you know, it would be hard for me to make a class that is stronger than the wizard in the core rulebook. The core rulebook has, in my opinion, the most powerful and strongest class there is. The wizard and the priest. I would say the priest is possibly even stronger than the wizard. I think actually the priest is possibly easily the best class in Shadowdark, and really desirable to play. The wizard would come next, and the others kind of can't keep up. They start, wizard and particular starts really hard to start off with, and just gets bumpkins nonsense crazy later on, which you would expect from D&D, because that's what's always happened with the wizard. So I can assure you that whatever I've built today is not as bad as the wizard in the core rule book. I can guarantee it. When you put it to the table, you'll be surprised just how nuts it is, because you've taken a scale of 10 for your spell level, and you've dropped it down to 5, like halved it. Like that means a whole bunch of things have been grouped together. It's actually much more than you might expect. And as soon as you start playing it, like, ooh, okay. Anyway, we're done. We're done for today. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. I do appreciate it. I know that these live streams are a little bit strange because we're making a class and we're making one for Shadowdark, which isn't Dungeons and Dragons officially. It's not D&D 5e officially, so people are like, do I really have any interest in that sort of thing? But by building stuff for Shadowdark, I think we solve a lot of the problems that we will wind up having when we are designing stuff for 5e and for modern D&D, and heck, even older versions of D&D, if you're still doing that sort of thing. So huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. If you took part in the poll, thank you for doing so. I do appreciate it. And Jasper in chat, the only one who's been feeding me lots and lots of information. I really do appreciate it. Jasper is an expert in the field of making basic D&D classes, because he's done a lot of them. And Shadowdark, and a lot of people consider Shadowdark to be modern basic D&D. And I'm not going to disagree with that. I think that's probably right. It is modern basic D&D. Anyway, that is pretty much everything I have to say. I want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon, particularly those in the paid tier, because without you, I just could not continue doing this. It would just wind up being me watching YouTube, somebody else doing stuff. That would be the end of that, which would be shame, would be sad. Anyway, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.